Hello there, men, and welcome to the Masculinism Movement channel, a place for men to be men and to talk about masculinity and men's issues. I'm your host, Brian Krall, and today I want to talk to you about silence, solitude, and meditation. Something that everyone needs, but hardly anyone gets anymore these days. Everyone needs some peace and fucking quiet and alone time at times. Some time in which your brain is not being stimulated by anything other than yourself and your own conscious thoughts is something that people need for their mental health and probably their intelligence and conscientiousness and mental power, if you want to call it that. Women seem to avoid this more than men do and can't stand silence. Which is why whenever you are on a first date with a woman and there's a brief pause in the conversation, she will call it an awkward silence, even when there really wasn't anything awkward about it. The thing is that silence just makes them uncomfortable. Women are afraid of being left to reflect upon their own thoughts, which could be a reason why they tend to be less mentally healthy than men. Studies have shown this. Maybe men simply are wired to need silence more than women do, but everyone needs it at least some of the time. Let me tell you what happens to anyone when they never get any peace and quiet or time alone to themselves, when their brains are constantly being occupied by lots of different stimuli, be it other people, work, cell phones, computers, TVs, radios, other technologies, social media, other forms of entertainment, or whatever it may be. Now, I realize I don't need to tell most of you out there this, as it's happening to everyone today, and anyone with even a modicum of awareness has probably noticed it themselves. But I'm going to try to explain it more thoroughly for any of you out there who maybe haven't noticed everything about this. When your brain is constantly stimulated and never given any time to think, what seems to generally happen across the board with everyone is the following. People's brains get rewired to have an inability to focus on any one thing for long periods of time, and thus their ability to concentrate on important things is reduced, and they are essentially doing less of things that they need to do, or doing them more poorly as they're constantly distracted and unable to concentrate. People become less mindful and aware, less thoughtful, and less in control of their own mind and emotions, and thus prone to things like irritability, nervousness, anxiety, depression, anger, and other negative feelings. People become less functional because they become dependent upon these forms of stimuli in order to perform certain actions that they associate with them. And since people are doing less thinking, they become less intelligent, less intellectual, less imaginative, and worst of all, have less of a sense of identity and concept of reality. Essentially, they're not taking the time to develop things like a worldview, values, beliefs, a life philosophy, and a deep sense of self. Most of these people become like mindless drones or robots who only work with the stimulus of whatever technologies they are addicted to. That is why when you invite one of these people to do something with you that requires focus, like watching a movie, they are unable to engage in the experience. And not only that, but will screw it up for everyone else with their squirrel brains as well. All of us men have had experiences of trying to watch a movie with a girl we were dating, having her be constantly distracted and distracting us as well, checking her phone, texting, and then asking us what she just missed, only to get frustrated at us for asking her to pay attention. This is because they have no attention to pay. So it's like asking an impoverished person to pay for something that there's no way they can afford. It's almost offensive to them. Women get this squirrel brain effect even worse than men because they are more social creatures and rely upon social stimuli to optimize their emotional state much more than men do. But in doing so, they are only getting themselves addicted to this social stimuli. And again, it has the same effect of making it so that they can't feel or function the way they want to without it and will get depressed. And thus, they seek it out in large quantities, which only rewires their brain to make them dependent upon it and unable to think for themselves without it. And worst of all, it causes their entire sense of self and reality to be based upon social stimuli and what others tell them to think, and even what others tell them about who they are. Basically, without solitude and silence, the female brain gets hijacked and controlled by social conditioning. Men are lucky that our brains don't feel the need for as much social stimulus or as much other negative, addictive stimuli such as social media and cell phones. It's much more common for you to find men doing things like working in silence or engaging in other silent activities such as working out, or doing things that require silent concentration and contemplation such as philosophizing or coming up with ideas. However, unfortunately, men are still human and thus are also susceptible to social conditioning and cultural programming. So in this day and age, the abundance of technology and other forms of stimulation that are seen as requirements for everyday life have overwhelmed many men's minds and have gotten just as addicted and dependent upon them as women, and are making men become become more like women socially and possess a lot of the same social and psychological faults and flaws. The social manipulation and the emotional drama, or the rudeness, the bitchiness. This is why it is so important for every man to have times of quiet meditation each day where he is free from any stimuli, technological or otherwise, where he can silently reflect upon his thoughts in solitude. Without this, he is going to be lacking in mental health and strength and masculinity. He will become more like a woman who has no real identity besides her social persona and the input she gets back from others telling her who she is or who to be, who not only can't think for herself, but has gotten to the point where she can hardly be alone with herself. And when she is, she has to turn on the TV or have something playing on her phone or be looking at something on her phone or talking to someone on her phone, so that she is not basically just sitting there alone with her own thoughts. Now, women can get away with not having a personal identity or solitary thoughts and being completely reliant upon social systems for the sense of reality, because society is gynocentric and it has been structured to support women who are dependent upon it. However, masculinity is expected to be able to be more independent than that, because men naturally are more independent than women. It is natural for men to be able to be alone, even in silence. Can you imagine? In fact, our brains even thrive in those conditions. We are built for it by the simple fact that it doesn't feel terrible to us like it does to a woman. Now, if you have already let yourself get addicted to stimuli, then of course you are going to experience some withdrawal, and it may not make you feel good at first to go without it. But once you get past the withdrawal, you will see how good meditation is for your mind. And that is really only possible for you to get in the amount that you need if you do not cohabitate with a woman, or anyone for that matter, but particularly a female romantic partner. You see, once you have shacked up with a lover, you are almost never going to get any peace and quiet when you need it. She may give it to you whenever she doesn't need your attention because she's getting it from something else, or maybe sleeping. But the times when she doesn't need your attention and you want peace and quiet will often not line up. And if you request some quiet alone time when she needs your attention, well, you are going to be hard-pressed to get the solitude and silence that you need. She may agree to it, but will inevitably cut it short or interrupt it periodically. So doing something like being an author, an entrepreneur who works from home, like I am, who needs to be able to get into deep states of focus, focus that will ideally last an entire work day, is a real struggle. All right, it is a struggle to write anything long when you live with a girlfriend, unless she is not there, has a day job of her own, or she's going to be gone for that time. All right, but when I lived with a girlfriend and was trying to write my books, I found myself mostly writing poetry whenever I lived with women, not many long articles. See, because poetry gives you the ability to be interrupted, which was inevitable when living with women. And I remember when I was young, I had this girlfriend for about 4 years, much of which we lived together for. We also had a child together. He's going to be 15 soon. We tried sharing a bedroom and having separate bedrooms, and we found that separate bedrooms was better. When I would practice meditation at night before bed, I would invariably be bothered by her. It was supposed to be meditation, like 30 to 60 minutes ideally. But even when I would tell her that I was going to meditate and she would agree not to bother me, she always would. She always would. It was only a few times in the years we were together that she didn't. Late in the relationship, I just started ignoring her. But getting time to yourself and peace and quiet is not something you can expect when you have a girlfriend you live with, especially with a child. But even without, and my son really wasn't the problem. She was. Sure, my son would bother me when I was meditating when he was an infant, and he would just crawl around and on me. But that was like the form of meditation I had signed up for in those specific times. I thought it would be fun to try to meditate with my baby boy and see if he would do it with me. If not, just let him crawl all over me. And I just try to maintain my posture and keep my concentration as he did. It was like a fun challenge. Once he was old enough to understand what meditation was, he started doing it with me, somewhere between 1 and 2. For toddlers, it's hard for them to sit still. They just have this constant surges of energy. But once the constant impulse of internal stimuli coming from that abundance of energy in their brand new bodies is producing starts to slow down, a child can be incredibly naturally gifted at meditation. I remember around when my son turned 4, and he suddenly became more able to meditate on his own without my guidance, and then showed an instant knack for it. By around the age 5, the first time I left him meditating on his own in another room, I went and was busying myself with cleaning, and after a handful of minutes, I don't know if it was like 5 or 10 or what, I was like, I just realized I've done a lot of dishes and left him alone longer than normally he meditates for, which is normally about 5 to 10 minutes before he asks if he can be done. So I stopped making a sound and turned the water off, and there's just silence. And that was such a rare thing when he was over. I wondered what he's doing. Another parent had said once, I know when there's pure silence that they're doing something, they want to hide from me, that they're doing something bad, so I got to go see what it is. And I knew he considered meditation a kind of chore. He doesn't usually like to do it for very long. I haven't heard him ask, can I be done? I'm still not hearing him ask it. So I got curious. I peeked through my head around the doorway. I was like, nope, my son's not doing anything secret. He was just sitting there meditating. So I observed him for a moment. After a moment, he looked over at me. What are you doing? I asked. Meditating, he said. I laughed. Yeah, I know, but how? He said, I just turned my brain off. I was like, holy shit. I felt like I was like Neo and he was Morpheus in the Matrix. I was like, oh my God, you might be the one. Like my kid suddenly just became a monk or something. Why and how could he do that? I guess it's because his brain's plasticity was still new, hadn't been overstimulated yet. Because he had never owned a cell phone or a computer or anything like that. Once the terrible twos are over and the kids have calmed down from their constant explosions of energy, they can do things like meditating in monk mode. Their brains are that impressionable. You can teach them to do just about anything. You can teach a child to focus by teaching them meditation. But parents these days don't do that. Instead, they put phones in front of their kids to occupy them instead of teaching them to sit in silence or think or read or meditate or something like that. They don't teach them to be able to concentrate or even to be able to be alone without feeling anxious or to think for themselves without having some other input inform them. So obviously you could see what the problems are with that. And man needs time of solitude and silence every day, the same way he needs 8 hours of sleep. And that sleep requires silence. Our brain needs to be shut off from outer stimuli a certain period of each day. The less that is for you, the less mentally healthy you will become. So it is very important for us to limit our screen time, limit the technological stimuli in our lives, and maximize our quiet me time. 6 months ago, I stopped using my cell phone like a cell phone. I started using it more like a landline. In fact, I decided to route it through my computer and stereo system. But I kept the sound off and only checked on it a few times a day by having it routed to my email and just checking my email. I stopped texting almost entirely, but when I was responding, I did so on my computer keyboard through my email, so the typing was easier, leading to me writing better, more professional-looking sentences, which, as an author, is very important. I mean, who would read something by someone whose sentences look like that of a teenager? Unfortunately, that's what I see on social media these days because people are using their phones and it makes them seem somewhat illiterate, And speaking of social media, I had decided to finally delete my Facebook account once and for all. And I'd been suspended from it several times before and stopped using it for 6 months at a time, twice before. But notice that the quality of my life when I didn't use it for those 6 months went up. And that my social life even improved because I went out more. And so I've stopped socializing on social media. I actually brought my Facebook back just for this channel when I started this channel, but I was off it again for another almost 6 months. And these days I try not to use it for anything but promoting this channel and, just not relying upon it for socializing, all right? And I don't spend any time on social media, really. I just make my posts and get off. And I've also learned that it's important to stop needing to have something constantly playing in the background. All right, as I'd grown accustomed to always having music or a podcast or a YouTube video or some type of talk, like a seminar or audiobook or whatever playing in the background. And I realized that while it's great to be constantly intaking information like that, as I talked about in my video on education, I realized that I also had, gone overboard with it and had allowed the amount of stimuli to become maximized to the point where I didn't really have much quiet time in my days at all anymore. And I was becoming dependent upon having some sort of background noise, and that needed to change, because it's important to have some quiet, silent solitude to just meditate and reflect in. You see, I'm someone who values these things, I think, more than Generation Z, because I grew up in the 90s, back before social media and even cell phones, where we had internet and email and even chat rooms too, and instant messenger eventually. And there were some places in the internet, like forums, where you could write comments and make posts and have conversations that way. But we didn't let those things dominate our social life. In fact, not everyone even had them. Because A, not everyone had computers, and B, everyone with computers didn't have every one of these forms of communication for them. Again, the ones that we had, we didn't rely on too heavily. All right, we usually still went to the phone to talk verbally if we couldn't get together, or we would just get together. And when I say talking on the phone, I mean that we had phones that were attached to the wall that we could call each other on to talk, but could not text each other on. Can you imagine that? And it was the entire family's line, so you couldn't spend forever on it. All right, you couldn't be talking to someone for more than 2 or 3 hours. Sometimes as teenagers we would get away with talking to people for 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 hours, but the families generally didn't like it. And if you needed to talk that long, you would usually just set up a time to get together and hang out. You would eventually want to get off the phone and get together with this person, right? Because you see, people weren't reliant upon the phone or any technology for that matter for their social life. They still connected in person with people much more frequently than people do today. I remember when cell phones came around and some people started using them. Text messaging cost money, but instant messaging and AIM on the computers didn't. And everyone had computers by then and had been taught how to type. And so people used AIM just as much as they used the phone to talk on verbally. And they would have conversations on instant messenger that were more like the conversations you would have verbally on the phone because of the fact that they knew how to type. Or if they didn't want to type, they would just call. These days, people all have cell phones and primarily rely on texting on these little keys with their thumbs. And the text messages and the notifications on the cell phones are basically putting your brain on blast and reprogramming it to make you squirrel-brained. And they are getting them addicted. These notifications are getting you addicted to your phones, just like your phones are a hard drug because of the dopamine spikes that they cause when you're alerted of every text message that you receive. You're like, oh, what's that? Let's check. So you get these dopamine spikes that make it addictive. And these phones aren't helping people socially. People aren't getting together as much as they used to. They aren't having verbal conversations as much as they used to. They aren't doing as much actual socializing and having as many conversations as they used to. When they do, they aren't focused on the thing that they are doing together, but are constantly distracted by their phones. We've all been out and seen people at restaurants and bars and stuff where, or even doing things who are more focused on their phones than doing whatever they're doing with their friends. Phones aren't helping people to be healthy social beings. They aren't helping people to be independent. They aren't helping people to be in relationships. All they're doing is hijacking people's brains and putting them on blast and making you unable to concentrate on anything else or connect with anyone or have a real conversation, let alone relationship. But worse yet, it's affecting people's mental health and your ability to think properly. That's why I decided to give up mine, just like I would any drug that I realized I'd become addicted to. I missed how my social life used to be before cell phones back in the 90s and early 2000s even. I miss how it used to be before, where we actually got together and had fun connecting and conversing, having these in-depth intellectual discussions and debates and doing things together. Since text messaging and social media took over, we don't really do that anymore. We don't have that same healthy, active, high-quality social life. And I miss how relaxing life used to be before these cell phones were putting our brains on blast. And since I stopped using it and stopped putting my brain on blast and constantly stimulating it with all of these things, but just allowing there to be more quiet time in my life, doing certain activities in silence, like taking baths or reading or giving myself some meditation time as I'm going to bed before going to sleep, or laying in bed, just to relax, laying in bed just to meditate in silence. And there's all of these things I'm doing in solitude now that have really helped my mental health and give me the ability to think about things I didn't normally think about. Some things I really needed to put my mind to deal with, like difficult things that I've been avoiding, for instance. It really helped me to work through some issues. Because when you're meditating in silence like that, even if you're doing things, you end up contemplating things that are important. What's more is that it increased my brain power and ability to focus. So I started being more able to think in depth and completely, and being more able to focus on writing for long periods of time with such great concentration, and thus writing longer, more in-depth articles again, and working on big projects such as this channel and the book that these are all readings from. I'm more focused and thus higher functioning and constantly able to enter what they call a flow state. And I have more inner peace and a number of other psychological benefits that I've found. And while my story is just anecdotal evidence, there's also been plenty of studies on the effects of meditation and how it helps mental health and focus, to say the least. And what I'm describing here is that you don't need to sit and practice in the lotus position with a traditional Buddhist meditation technique or anything like that. Simply being in solitude and silence, practicing that mindfulness and focus, thinking about things you need to think about, such as who you are, what emotional issues you need to work on, your life's purpose and the meaning of life, etc. This is all you need to do. So just try to get some quiet alone time every day where you can reflect to yourself. Turn off the radio and TV, the computer and the phone and everything. And keep in mind that every man needs times of quiet meditation throughout the day in order to unwind and engage in retrospection and contemplation. Do not let yourself become addicted to stimuli and have your brain hijacked and rewired by it. Be able to turn things off and focus and think. If you do not control your own mind, something else will. And they'll do it through your phone, computer, and TV. So it is very important to manage the stimuli you input into your brain. Just as how you wouldn't take some strange unknown drug of unknown dosage, you should be discerning about the media you input your brain with. And at certain times of day, you should just be able to hit that off switch and do without that input. If you can't do that, you are an addict, and you should treat your addiction to noise like any other addiction. Take control of your mind. Practicing meditation the way that monks do is a very good idea for people who are in need of a detox from these stimuli and need to work on gaining control of their minds, or people who just have busy lives and need to reserve some quiet time to meditate with. However, it is not necessary to sit and practice meditation if you have other times when you will be in silent solitude and your mind will not be occupied with any outside stimuli. So for instance, when you are taking a bath, you are meditating. And that's something that I, as an athlete, do almost every day after a hard workout. I take a salt bath to relax my muscles. That is a meditation time for me. All right, and there are other activities that can be meditative as well, even when there's some stimulus, like going for a walk, for instance, or with listening to certain types of music, it can be meditative. And if you are the type of person who lays awake for a while before going to sleep at night, you are technically meditating while you do that. And so when you have these times of silent solitude in your day to meditate, that means you don't really need to set aside other time to sit and do so. But if you're the type of person who lays awake at night, you might actually find it helpful in getting to sleep to actually sit and practice meditation more formally, like a monk in the lotus position, because that is more effective. And it's a very good idea to begin the day every day with a moment of quiet seated meditation as well, so that you can start your day off on the right foot, rather than with checking your phone and instantly putting your brain on blast, and oftentimes getting some negative stimuli. This morning meditation will give you the ability to set the state of your mind and set your intentions for the day, and thus gives you more power and control over your day and how it will go. And so if you would like to learn how to actually practice meditation, you don't have to take a meditation class. You can do so right now in the comfort of your own home by checking out this article that I have posted for you below, which teaches you exactly how to do it in a simple step-by-step format that anyone can do successfully. You find that meditation has many benefits, which is something that has been scientifically proven by numerous studies. So we have all of the data. We know how to take control of our minds and tune out all of the noise of the world so that we can have that sense of inner peace, mindfulness, higher consciousness, and all of the other psychological benefits that you will reap from practicing meditation. You just have to make the time for it. So make sure you find some time of silent solitude throughout the day, each and every day.
That concludes this video. Thanks for listening. I hope I mansplained that good enough for you. If you like what you heard, please click the like button. And if you feel you gained some value from this video and would like to give some back, please do so with the PayPal link below, because your support helps fund me doing this work and fight the good fight for men like you. If you are ready to take the red pill and wake up from the matrix, well then, I have the perfect book for you. The Bible of Esoteric Knowledge is a super concise, dense, info-packed philosophy textbook, written in the same verse format as the Bible, but combining multiple different, highly esoteric philosophies such as Taoism, Hinduism, Buddhism, shamanism, ancient paganism, and a special balance between theoretical physics and metaphysics, along with some special bonus info on the cryptic secrets of sexuality and death. This book will stimulate your intellectual philosopher's mind like no other, especially since it's a lot shorter and easier to read than most philosophy books made up entirely of run-on sentences and never-ending paragraphs, and, can be quite boring and exhaustive. Full of all the most fascinating mystical secrets of the universe, gratify your inner geek and quench your thirst for meaning with the Bible of Esoteric Knowledge. Get your copy at the link below for a special sale price today. Enlightenment has never been so easy.